Hello and welcome back everyone for your favorite chess YouTube channel, Chess Sensei. For today's video, we are going to learn middle game concepts that every chess player must know. Now, the first one is the opposite side attack, and who doesn't love attack when it comes to chess play? Now, it comes from the Jobavalon system after knight to c3, pawn to g6, and bishop to f4, bishop to g7, and pawn to e4. Of course, white is trying to go pawn to e5, so black stops that by playing pawn to d6, and white goes queen to d2, as white is trying to castle queenside and try to go for checkmate with bishop h6, h4, h5. This is the main idea for white. So here black castles kingside, white also castles queenside, and now let the fun begin. So here black first move is pawn to c6. Black is trying to go pawn to b5 and pawn to b4. So here we wanna play h4 first, but if we play h4, then black is going to go pawn to h5, and it's going to be hard for us to open up the king side again or the h file mainly, as it is our attacking source. So here we wanna play bishop to h6 to prevent this h pawn from moving. And we ourselves, who is gonna push h4, h5. Now here black plays pawn to b5. Now, the second concept here, which I will introduce you, which is the prophylaxis. The prophylaxis means that you stop your opponent's plans before you go on and play your own plans. So if we try to figure out what is the plan for black, we will see that black played b5 to go b4 and try to win this pawn on e4. So of course we are going to go pawn to f3 to defend our pawn on e4, as in case of b4 and we moved our knight, then the e4 pawn is protected. So here black plays queen to a5. Again, if we try to apply the prophylaxis theme, then we will figure out that black is threatening pawn to b4 and he will win the pawn on a2. So hence why we play king to b1 just to defend our pawn on a2, and here we are going to reroute this knight to c1 to defend the a2 square later on when it gets attacked. So here after pawn to b4, then we are going to go knight to e2, and here after bishop to e6 hitting the a2 pawn. Of course b3 there is nothing wrong with it, but you make yourself weaker on the dark squares on the queen sides, and maybe later on, if these bishops doesn't get traded, in case of black playing bishop to h8 and sacrifices the exchange, for example, then in case of this diagonals opens up, then this queen is going to be deadly here. Also, keep in mind there is a5, a4, and black is trying to checkmate as you created a hook. So here we want to play knight to c1 just to defend the a2 pawn, and yeah, follow up our plan. Now if you try to figure out a plan for black, it's going to be super hard. Black's only plan is to retreat back with his queen and try to go for a5, a4, and this is super crazy position because after pawn to h4 and pawn to a5, both sides trying to checkmate each other. So here I will continue with pawn to h5. Now first of all, in case of black takes the pawn on h5, then we will sacrifice the rook. It is a temporary sacrifice because after queen takes g5, then black can't really stop the checkmate on g7. So black can't really take. So here, if black plays knight to d7, for example, trying to complete his development, then here we are going to trade at this time. And you might be asking why we delayed the trade all of this time. We delayed the trade all of this time to guarantee the queen gets to h6 after the trade happens. So after king takes here, we are going to take with the h pawn, of course, to open up the h file and get our rook to the game. So in case of black takes with the h pawn, of course, the queen h6 and the queen to h8 is a checkmate. And here after black takes with the f pawn, then the queen lands on f7, on h6, and here there is two moves for black, which is king to g8 and king to f7. Of course, in case of king e7, then there is some pawn to g4, and you try to follow it up with pawn to g5. Now, if black plays some logical move like pawn to a4, tries to continue his attack. Now here we want to play pawn to g5, kicking away this knight, and after the knight moves to h5, then it leaves the h7 pawn hanging, and with it the g6 pawn is also hanging. So king to e8 is forced, and queen takes g6. Of course, bishop to f7 is forced as we are attacking the bishop also. But after queen to h6, then white is up a lot of pawns and white is winning the game. And white is also attacking the knight. Now, you don't be worried about something like pawn to b3, as you can just take it, and after takes, you will go a3 and block the queen side, and you are completely winning. Now, let's take a look at the second game we have. At the second game we have, it comes from the Catalan opening, which is white is sacrificing the pawn on c4, but in compensation he gets a huge super light square bishop on this diagonal. So here white plays a4 to try to stop black from playing b5. So here black plays bishop to b4 as a4 weakens this b4 diagonal. So here white castles kingside, and after black castles kingside himself, then queen to c2 was played. Queen c2 is just intending to cover up this e4 square, and maybe later on the game, white can go for e4, e5. So here black plays rook to e8. Black also is saying, you know what, you are not the only one who is trying to play in the center. I am myself trying to play in the center, and I am trying to play pawn to e5. So white's saying, no, you can't play pawn to e5, and puts his bishop on this diagonal to prevent the pawn from pushing to e5. Now here black plays knight to d5. He's saying, okay, you know what, give me your dark square bishop. And white's saying, you know what, take it, I don't really care about it. So here black plays pawn to b5 to try to defend his pawn on c4, but this is a really failed attempt, as these pawns will get super weak very shortly, and you will see. Now here knight to g5 was played, of course trying to create the checkmate on h7. Now here black plays knight to f8, trying to defend with the minimum cost as we explained before, and the knight on f8 covers the h7 square. Now in the game, white plays knight to e5, continues adding pressure on the f7 pawn, and of course there is this crazy variation after pawn to f6, then this knight moves with a tempo, hitting the queen and taking a pawn, and after queen to b6, still hitting the knight and also hitting this other knight. Then here there is knight takes b4, and after knight takes b4, hitting the queen, and I am still hitting the knight. Then there is queen to d2, you take my knight, I will take your rook, and if you take my bishop, I will take your knight. And at the end of the day, then white is up 2 points of material, and white is up an exchange and should be winning the game. Due to the all weaknesses on the king side also, then white is completely winning. So here black can't really play f6, black plays knight takes f4, and after the exchange happens on f4, he plays bishop to b7, but now you can see that b5 is backfiring actually and not beneficial to defending the pawn on c4 or whatsoever, as the pawn on c6 here is getting super weak, and immediately white takes the pawn on c6. Now in this position, white's attacking the queen, of course, and after queen to d6, black is hitting the knight and hitting the pawn on f4. Of course, black is hoping for something like knight to e5, but after the trade of the light square bishops and white plays pawn to f6, then black is winning because black got rid of the only active piece from white, which is the light square bishop. Of course, f6 doesn't win a piece because there is knight to e4, and after queen to d5, hopefully this knight is defended so we can retreat our knight. But you can see that white lost all of his advantage, and if anyone's better, then it's black. So here in this position, white didn't want to move this knight, so white played a takes b5 to defend his knight, but also white didn't also trade pieces with knight takes b4 and let this exchange happens, because this is the only active piece for white that white is playing with. So here queen takes f4 was played, then the lady is trying to make some sort of danger here for white, but white calmly played knight to h3 to kick her out, so played queen to h4, trying to also saying, you know what, I am sitting here, I won't really move, and white plays this great move, which is pawn to e4, essentially closing the door between these two bishops, and of course trying to go knight to a5 in case of this bishop moved, and it's actually moved to d6 as to put pressure on the pawn on h2. And now white plays knight to a5, hitting the bishop on b7. But the important thing that if this bishop gets traded with this bishop, then this bishop has got no really opponents, or nothing can really try to limit off this light square bishop on this long diagonal. So here after rook to b8, knight takes b7 was played, and after rook takes b7, then here pawn to e5 is hitting the bishop and also hitting the rook at the same time. So here black tries to play bishop to b8, and white grabs the rook on b7, and black plays queen takes h3. Now when the dust settles, you can see that white is up an exchange, as white has got a rook for a bishop, or excuse me, got a rook for a minor piece, which is the knight. So here white is straightforward winning. In the game, white continues with queen takes c4, and after queen to g4, no need for worrying and going king to h1. You wanna keep your pieces stable and close to each other, so white plays bishop to g2, and after black plays knight to g6, to trying to come through to f4 or h4, then white plays the final move of the game, which is queen to c6, and which after black just resigned the game, because in case of knight to f4, then there is queen takes e8, which is checkmate, and so the rook will have to move, and with it I will have time to play something like queen to e4 and try to get these queens off the board, and white should be winning the game. Now at the last game here, I want to show you a really important middle game concept, which is to put your opponent in pressure early on from the opening. Now here, white played e4, e5, bishop to c4, which is the bishop opening, and after bishop to c5, black is copying white, and after white plays knight to f3, hitting the pawn, black defends it with knight to c6. Then here white just castles, white is playing normal opening moves, like a grandmaster here. And now b6 is the first inaccuracy from black. Black should develop his knight and try to castle really early on, but black goes pawn to b6. He's trying to fianchetto to his light square bishop or something. Then white continues developing normally and slowly with pawn to d3. He is opening up his last bishop, and also this knight can develop via c3 and d5 at any time in case it's needed. So here pawn to h5, which is also a mistake from black. So what h5 makes, it is weakening this g5 square, but also keeping your pawn on h5 loose. So of course putting your opponent on early pressure with this move knight to g5. Now this is not like the fried lever, because the fried lever, this pawn is backwards here on b7. So after pawn to d5 here, then white can simply take with his bishop, hitting the knight and still hitting the pawn. You will have to defend your knight some way, and you will lose the pawn on f7. So here in this case, black is saying, you know what, I regret moving my pawn to h5. I just want to defend the pawn on h6, so I will play knight to h6. And you know what, I am sorry, yeah, I made a mistake, but I am sorry, please forgive me. And of course we are going to say no. And now of course plays queen takes the pawn on h5, adding even more attacker to the f7 pawn, because now it is hit by 3 pieces, but it only defended once. So black is saying, you know what, I will just castle, I will get my king to the safety, I will get my rook to protect the f7 pawn, and you know what, show me your play. And now white plays this crazy brilliant move, which is queen to g6, which is absolutely beautiful move, as the checkmate on h7 is unpreventable. Now you can try to take the queen, but unfortunately the computer won't let me make it, as the bishop is pinning the pawn towards the king, but also the knight guards the h7 square, so the queen is trying to come to h7 and saying hello to this guy. So this queen would have to sacrifice itself, and after queen takes g5, then bishop takes the queen on g5, and here anything is winning, and white should be winning the game. Now the game continues after knight to e7, bishop takes e7, and bishop takes e7, And now just queen to g3, and after queen to g3 there is nothing really to keep playing on for black. White is just winning, white is just up a full queen for nothing. The game continued pawn to c6 and knight to c3. Black played d6, black played on for a couple of moves and then resigned the game. As white continues playing aggressively with pawn to h4, and after e takes f4, then rook takes f4, and white eventually doubles up the rook on the f5. So here black plays bishop to b7, then after rook to a f1, then it maximizes the pressure on the f2 pawn, but also the queen is coming to f2, and the queen is gonna say also hello to this f7 pawn. Now in the game, black tried to go pawn to b5, and after bishop to b3 tried to go pawn to b4 even, but after knight to e2, white is getting also the knight to f5. Black played pawn to c5 to try to prevent it, and now white goes rook f1 to f3, and it's just going to go queen to f2 and win this pawn on f7, and with it black just resigned the game, and white like that just won the game due to his early pressure on the f7 pawn. Now make sure to check our latest video, which is how to play the Halloween Gambit if you want to scare your opponent and win games quickly and scary. So make sure to check that to play it, and goodbye.